Welcome to another session of Gosu Academy. We are focusing on mechanics, more specifically aim, since that is a topic that is interesting to any player ever, basically. A lot of it is very recent because I've had a lot of thoughts about aim. My thinking recently in terms of sensitivity is that you have players who have a high sensitivity but a very shaky aim. The best example of this is Simple. If you find a video of Simple's highlights, it's very common that we will see sort of the Simple jiggle. So when he shoots, especially with AWP or with Deagle or something like this, his aim is pretty much the opposite of clean. This is a perfect example. On Dust 2 against Team Liquid. I'll put some music on, or like the audio on here. Already wiggle on the first kill. Wiggle. More wiggle. And the last one, also a little bit of wiggle. If we then go and search Simple settings, we can go and check out his sensitivity. He has got an eDPI of 1236. When you have a player like Simple and he has this wiggle, you are automatically thinking he has a pretty high sensitivity. The average professional Counter-Strike player has an eDPI of roughly around 880, meaning that Simple is definitely one of the players who has a very high eDPI. It makes sense then that he has, a high eDPI that gives him therefore this kind of wiggle. But if we take another player, another very famous player, Forest, and we look at his highlights, we'll find any random place in the highlights, and most of the time what we will see is him having incredibly clean aiming. Here, no wiggle whatsoever on the AWP kill, no wiggle. Even here, if we slow this down and take a look at the tracking, because that is typically a really good way to show the wiggle as well. I've slowed it down now to half speed. Here there's no wiggle, and look at the clean tracking on Device's head. There is no wiggle, even though he's kind of being caught off guard and it's a little bit of a stressful situation. You will see on the last two kills that his aim is extremely clean. And typically players who are good with Deagle, look, just a one tap with no wiggle whatsoever, and another one tap with no jiggle, perfect tracking movement. When we're watching this after having watched someone like Simple play, the assumption that we're automatically making is, okay, Forest must be a low sensitivity player. His one tap accuracy is great. He hit 3 1-deeks and then he basically hit 2 1-taps afterwards with the AK. If we take a look at someone like Nico, known for having great first bullet accuracy, we see his eDPI is less than half that of Simple. And he also plays what I believe is a bigger mouse than Simple. It makes sense for someone with a very low sensitivity to have good first bullet accuracy. If we check Forest, well, he in fact has an eDPI that is higher than that of Simple. But when watching Forest play compared to how Simple plays, it almost doesn't add up in our minds. And I can give you many more examples of players with very clean aiming. Someone like Oscar, also very high eDPI. Flamesy, also a very high eDPI. Armanek, very high eDPI. In fact, even someone like Voxic, who is actually the eDPI king of all of Counter-Strike, has quite clean aiming considering he plays a very high sensitivity. But we do also have other players who have a very low sensitivity, but pretty, what I call, chaotic aim. One of the best examples of this is someone like Kerrigan. He definitely has times where his aim is very clean, but he definitely also has times where his aim is very chaotic. This is a pretty good example. I don't even think his aim looks that chaotic, but imagine how someone like Forest or Nico would approach this situation compared to how Kerrigan approaches this situation. So he's running, and it's just full random. Like he could stop, take his time. Obviously, this is the error that he makes. But also, if you look, there is very little focus on aiming at the right spot before he presses the mouse. Players in Counter-Strike will trend towards having a lower sensitivity on average in the future. And it's because the more sort of well orchestrated a T-side is, the less need for a high sensitivity you have. You want to play in a way the amount you have to move your mouse before killing your opponent when you see him is as small as possible. My whole point is that I want you all to be walking out of this session with having found your perfect sensitivity, basically. I can't say for sure if my theory is true, but my theory is that sensitivity actually does not matter at all in Counter-Strike. The only thing that matters, how good are your micro adjustments? And then from that question, you have to find the sensitivity that fits you. Since Counter-Strike is a game where you really have to be able to do all types of aiming, basically, and where accuracy is very, very important. It is also a game where you need to find a sensitivity where your micro adjustments fit your sensitivity. So someone like Voxic, for example, he can play an EDPI of 2400. I'm right now on 8 DPI. So if I put my sensitivity to 3, this is essentially what a Voxic sensitivity is. I am barely moving my mouse, and if I am, let's say, going to peak ramp and I want to peak at headshot level, like if I have to, imagine I'm holding palace and then I want to peak slope. Flicking down here is tough, and keeping my crosshair in the right position, it is tough, even for someone who has been playing 15,000 hours. On an offline server, I'm able to do it pretty well. Like, let's say I'm holding slope and someone shoots me from con. I can do a pretty fast movement and start spraying. But in a match type scenario where there is no room for error, basically, and also I'm affected by nerves, I'm affected by, whatever is going on mentally in that moment, I will be way more jumpy. I will grip my mouse harder, which will make me shake. And this is an example of why I could never play competitively at Voxic sensitivity. I would be horrendous at it, because my micro adjustments compared to the average person, I view as being suboptimal. And the way I coped with this in my time as a player was, I was playing a below average sensitivity. So I was playing a sensitivity of 0.8, which is an EDPI of 640. So quite a bit lower than most other players. The EDPI of AWP players is slightly higher. I'm not sure exactly, but I think it's something like 920. Having basically 2/3 of the sensitivity that the average AWP player has doesn't necessarily put me at a disadvantage. It just means it puts me sort of as an outlier. The reason I felt this was necessary for me to do was because exactly my micro adjustments were much worse. My small movements were worse, and I would say coped with it, or I adjusted to it by lowering my sensitivity. Having a sensitivity that is too high for me to have good micro adjustments makes things way more difficult for someone like me who has, I guess, a below average level of fine motor skills. If your name is Voxic, or if your name is Forest, or if your name is Flamesy, and your micro adjustments are very good even on a very high sensitivity, I don't see a reason to change it. It gives you more freedom, and as long as you can still control this in a good way, you should just keep at it. I don't think if you have a high sensitivity, you should change by going to a lower sensitivity, so long as you feel you have control of your sensitivity. And that is kind of the main point. When I am playing on an offline server, I could feel like this is sensitivity that I can control. Like, I would be able to keep my crosshair at headshot height. I can even spray pretty accurately. But as soon as we introduce a competitive element, people shooting back, nerves, all these things, I know from experience, this is just an uncontrollable sensitivity for me personally. At the same time, if you are a very low sensitivity player, if you feel that getting a higher sensitivity is something that seems kind of uncontrollable, I would advise you to not change. What you should, I think, remove from your brain is everything I've talked about in terms of average sensitivity, and instead you should go into games considering if you feel control of your micro adjustments. When I played stand-in for Complexity, and I played with Config, who has an EDPI of the exact average, 880. At least I'm pretty sure he used to. Actually, he might have even been playing an EDPI of 960. I think he was playing 1.2 on 800, or maybe 2.4, 400, but it's the same thing. What was interesting about this was that Config, a player who is known for having very clean aiming, he watched me play. My EDPI was 800, which was lower than what Config had. And after playing with me for a few days as a stand-in, Config came to me and he said, I think your sensitivity is too high. And a part of me knew that that was true. When he said it, it hit me that obviously people are different. Even though Config was playing a higher sensitivity than me, his aim was far cleaner. And no matter how much work I put in, I would never be able to have as clean and consistent and good tracking aim as Config had with his sensitivity. Almost everyone that we talk about as being a great aimer has smooth, beautiful, consistent aim with a high accuracy, like a high first bullet accuracy. So if I go now to HLTV and we go through the list of players who has the best aim on this top list, I would argue that someone like Robs, he has phenomenal aim. Mechanically very skilled player, everyone knows that. He has very clean aim. Someone like Brokey, very calm guy, in fact also plays a pretty low sensitivity, an EDPI of 760 even for an AWP. I think someone like Frozen has pretty clean aim. I think Rain has clean aim. I think Saiwu has very clean aim. Flamesy has very clean aim. Spinks has very clean aim, and Messi has very clean aim, and to some extent actually Apex has pretty clean aim as well. Dunk, who is obviously the revelation of 2024. Here's a guy, again, playing above the average EDPI, playing a very sort of small mouse, a very fast mouse, and yet he has extremely clean aiming with basically perfect tracking aim. What we generally think of as the best aimers are people who have very smooth, consistent aim. The reason why this is important is because exactly what we talked about with the micro adjustments, you want to find a way where no matter what your level of micro adjustments is, no matter if your fine motor skills are garbage like mine, or if they're great, you want to find a sensitivity where you are able to have clean aiming and have your sensitivity be controllable, basically. If you're one of those guys who's able to have an EDPI of 1500 and have clean aiming, well, all the power to you. In fact, I envy you. These are typically some of the most mechanically skilled players, the guys who have a high sensitivity and clean aiming. I am horrendous at drawing, so please bear with me. If you imagine aim is a spectrum, here is, let's say, 0. And here is, let's say, 10. Then in the middle, we have 5. So imagine a spectrum of how hard is this shot to hit. Imagine the easiest kill you could ever think of. That would be a 0. Then on the other hand, imagine the hardest shot you could ever hit. An insane 180 flick shot, headshot with a deagle. Every player, I think, is capable of basically hitting the zeros, obviously. And most players are capable of hitting, like most top professionals are capable of hitting a 10. It's going to be very rare, and it's a situation where the stars need to align for this to work, but it is somewhat possible. Someone like Nico, for example, we ask ourselves, compared to the average pro, is he as good as or better at hitting the zeros, basically, the easiest shots? Well, I think someone like Nico, except for that one round on Nuke at the Stockholm Major, where he missed second in the back. He is typically very good at hitting shots in the back, far above the average player, and this is a strength he has from playing a very low sensitivity. If we would make a line describing, like, let's say, Nico's comfort zone in aiming, I would say a 0, a 1, a 2, and all those kind of things. That is something he's very comfortable hitting. He's overall got a lot of consistency, again, because he is a pretty low sensitivity player. But there is a point we get to where Nico will not hit a 180 1D without stopping. His sensitivity likely isn't high enough. So maybe a 10 and a 9, it's just not possible for Nico to hit this. I'll even take Simple as an example because he's even better. Everyone knows Simple is amazing. And if I ask everyone here, is Simple capable of hitting a 10? I think Simple is maybe the player in the world who is the most capable of hitting a 10. He is far above average when it comes to hitting a 10. But because of this wiggle aim he has, and because of him not having very clean aim, I would argue that his zeros and his ones are worse than a sort of average professional player. Here's an example of Simple absolutely having a 0 or a 1. I guess you could argue both. But as body moves, he overflicks his target, he misses, and now he has a sort of tougher shot. Let's call this a 3 or a 4. And he hits it. So the easy shot he actually misses, but the harder shot he doesn't. I think if this was Saiwu in this situation, he wouldn't miss this. I know Simple would hit this shot either way. He's basically toying with his food. But there is the case that when body moves, Simple actually overflicks his target. Something I think we would never see Saiwu do, for example. If we again go back to paint, I think Simple absolutely has 10s and 9s and 8s and so on, and down the stretch. But we get to a point where, because he doesn't have smooth aim, he is lesser than the average professional. I think his zeros and his ones, the average pro is better at hitting the easy shots than someone like Simple. Now again, since this is, I would argue, pretty genetically connected in a way, I think Simple has one of the best work rates in all of Counter-Strike. And I bet you he has spent more time on deathmatch and aim practice than almost any player out there. And yet he still has this wiggle aim. He still sometimes misses people in the back where the average professional would be doing a better job. And why is that? Well, it's because it doesn't come down to practice. It comes down to, I think, genetics. One way to adjust, which I think is the kind of obvious way to adjust, is Simple should have lowered his sensitivity. And I think there is arguments, which is crazy. There are arguments that, in my head at least, that Simple would have been a better player if he would be playing a slightly lower sensitivity. From watching him play, it seems that he would be better off having something he would be able to control even better. I'm not saying he would be far greater, but I think there is the possibility he would be a more consistent player and therefore better. But since he didn't do this, how is it possible that Simple is that good at the game? This is where, again, I think Simple is sort of a statistical anomaly, but it also explains why he's known for having this very aggressive, risky playstyle, because that is that's the fix. If I'm peeking out CT and I'm peeking I want to peek Firebox, maybe instead of taking the angles one by one and being super specific about clearing it, maybe what I want to do is wide swing and adjust instead. I saw a statistic I haven't double checked, but I'm pretty sure it's true, that Dunk didn't have a single ace at the entirety of Katowice, and yet he had such an incredibly high multi-kill percentage. Well, why is that? It's because players like Saiwu and players like Dunk, they don't shine as much in individual rounds. They don't have crazy highlights the same way Simple has. But what they do have is a high level of consistency. They will have many rounds where they are performing very well. And so if you get 1 or 2 kills every round, sort of on average over a match, you will at the end of the day, at the end of the game, have very good statistics, but very few highlights. Whereas if you instead are someone like Simple, who maybe 1 out of 3 rounds will get an ace, this is obviously a very extreme example, you will have more highlights naturally. But you will also have a sort of smaller level of consistency. A 50-50 fight, when your name is Saiwu, might be a 60-40 fight. Because you, on average, are better than the player you are having the 50-50 fight against at having 50-50 fights. Whereas someone like Simple, well, maybe for Simple, a 50-50 fight is pretty 50-50. Because both players are equally good at the sort of easier range of aim. Something what for Saiwu would be a 30-70 fight. So Saiwu having a 30% chance of winning this fight. For Simple, that might be a 40-60% fight and might be more worth taking. That means someone who has chaotic aim, their advantages lies in the unpredictable part of their aim. They could take a fight that they normally wouldn't win. Forget everything about average sensitivity. Forget what Simple plays. Forget what Nico plays, what Saiwu plays. Forget that some players play high. I know these are things I've had focus on today, but they're important to understand my reasoning. And then think about the fact that all you need to do is finding a sensitivity where you are able to consistently, smoothly, and reliably go from one point to another in case you get peaked from multiple angles. I hope that you feel like you learned something, or even if you feel like you maybe didn't learn something, I hope that I could challenge your worldview a little bit with some of the thoughts I had here with aim.